Evening, everyone, and anyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the, meeting number 4 of the Finance Advisory Committee to order. Today is September 9th, 2021. Thank you all for coming out in this wonderful liquid sunshine that we've been getting all day. I appreciate it. Tonight's agenda is published, and since we are in person, I will not read the governor's message and order. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes of the past meeting of September 2nd, 2021?
Motion to approve last Thursday's meeting minutes.
Second?
September.
2.
Thank you, Beth. Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
You said there was a
There was
minor
one
typo?
minor typo, Walter, and
Okay.
I'm not seeing it as a big thing, but on the liaison assignments,
Mhm.
the second line from the bottom, to AFC and should be to represent.
Okay.
Okay.
Lose the S.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Any other discussion? Can we have a vote? Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Ford, yes.
Yeah. Should I vote even though I wasn't here last week?
Then
You have
abstain.
I abstain.
You do either. Paul?
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Siddiqui, yes. Moretti, yes. 7-0-0. 6-1-0.
601.
601. Okay, thanks. All right, so tonight we do have a guest. We have several guests, actually, for the same subject on the Community Preservation Act. Jennifer Doherty is the chair of the Community Preservation Exploratory Committee. Chris Allen, our noted historian from Westborough, is also present and a member of the committee. And I see Select Board Member Shelby Marshall. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. And Jennifer, let me just begin by asking you if you wouldn't mind giving us a summary of the material. I think everybody on the board, I hope everybody on the board, on the committee has had a chance to review the material. And so if you begin, please.
Sure. My name is Jen Doherty. I'm the chair of the CPA Exploratory Committee here in Westborough. I'm also chair of the Historical Commission. And our committee was appointed back in November by the Select Board to basically explore the idea of adopting the Community Preservation Act here in Westborough. Community Preservation Act, also known as CPA, is a state program, state legislation that allows communities to place a surcharge on their real estate taxes of up to 3%. That money is then partially matched with funds from the state, and those funds communities then can use in the areas of affordable housing, open space and recreation, and historic preservation. The funds are managed by a local community preservation committee that's appointed by the Select Board, like any other board or committee in town. And the CPC looks at applications or takes in applications for funding, usually on a yearly basis in towns, and then presents their recommendations for funding to town meeting every year. And town meeting ultimately votes on how the CPA funds are spent. So there's a lot of details around the financing, which we can get into, certainly, if you guys want to. But our board has kind of been looking at this over the past several months, almost a year at this point. We've talked to some of the other boards and committees around town just to kind of get their thoughts on CPA, whether they think it might be something that would be useful to Westborough or not. And of course, we're always interested in hearing what people think about the numbers. Our committee has been kind of looking for an affordable number, so we were trying to keep the impact to property owners, or the impact to homeowners at least, to around $50 a year from the surcharge. So that would put us at about a 0.5% surcharge that we would adopt for CPA. So yeah, I'm open to questions, and I've also got support again from Chris and Shelby if you'd like to hear some different perspectives than mine. I know I've given a lot of presentations on this, so yeah.
Yes. Kristen? Chris?
Whenever I have a chance, I certainly will take it. We've been involved with the CPA for a whole year, but many of you may remember that the Community Preservation Act was introduced and talked about in early 1998 or so. And it was defeated. It never got brought to town meeting because it really had not been adopted by the state at that time. And it was a very different animal than it is now. And it was on a real estate tax and not from the Registry of Deeds. What I care about, and I was involved with it back in 1998 as well, is that Westborough is missing out. Our neighbors, Southborough, Northborough, Upton, Grafton, Shrewsbury, all have the Community Preservation Act, are benefiting from it, and are getting money from it. Westborough residents are paying into the state CPA fund, but they are not getting any benefits from it at all. What it does fund, and was founded to fund, are the areas that often are overlooked or underfunded. Affordable housing, and you have to admit we need more affordable housing in Westborough. Open space, that's an incredible important part of Westborough and continues to be, particularly in the times of COVID. More people than ever have been using our trails, our charm bracelet, and our open space. And historic preservation has been very important as well. But often, these areas are not funded or they're overlooked. In the CPA, these are the 3 areas that are focused on. And I feel badly that of all the towns around, we're the only ones that are not taking advantage of this. And I'm proud of Westborough and always have been, but I want to continue to be proud that we actually invest in these 3 areas that are so important. We've focused particularly on making it affordable. In the past, people were kind of grumbling, oh, another tax. And that's the reason why our committee has looked at about $40 or $50 a year. As I said before, it's about a dinner at Harry's. Big deal. I think we can afford it. I hope we can. But more than that, we believe in the values it represents. And there are quite a few projects in town, like a dog park, for instance, that's very popular. It's one of those things that could be funded under CPA, or various other types of recreation, and of course, affordable housing. That seems to be a key part. I worked many years on our Affordable Housing Committee, and that is a very important use of CPA funds. It can be to actually work to transform empty buildings into affordable housing, or work with agencies like Habitat for Humanity. So I think it's incredibly important that Westborough adopts and benefits from this Community Preservation Act. We missed the boat in the year 2000 when a lot of other towns did sign on to it, and it's about time. In fact, it's overdue that we show our pride in Westborough, particularly in these 3 areas of affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space and recreation. So I hope you'll see this as a favorable move on our part.
Thank you, Chris. Ms. Marshall, would you like to make,
Hi, Shelby Marshall. I'm a member of the Select Board. Thank you for having us here tonight. So I won't repeat anything that Chris said other than to say I wholeheartedly agree with everything she has shared. A couple points I will sort of add additional emphasis to. One is, I think when we think about the strategic plan that the town and taxpayers invested in, many elements of the strategic plan address the critical areas that the CPA helps with funding: affordable housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreation. So there's continuity there. Just across the West Main Street here tonight, the final public hearing for the master plan is underway. While that is not a mandate, what you'll see out of that, if you've had a chance to, I'm sure, review it, is that the areas that it addresses also overlaps with what CPA looks to address. What I like as a select board member is that the CPA creates funding sources that are managed, that have to come before the town on an annual basis. So it's not just sort of a free-for-all, but they are specifically allocated to the 3 areas that Chris has outlined. So it's not just sort of money and then it sort of flows into the general fund and then where does it go? But there's a process around it, it's structured, and it is aligned with the values and the amenities and the, kind of the desires and hopes and dreams of those that are here in Westborough. So the other thing I'll call your attention to is that these exploratory committee has recommended that thus far in our discussions where we're at, while we haven't taken a formal vote, that will ultimately come to the select board. But we are looking at a first $100,000 exemption. You should have seen that in the slide deck that was shared with you. So it does provide some alleviation on the tax bill element of the valuation. And then there is also a hardship element there. So yeah, I think it's a thoughtful process that addresses the needs of those who can't afford to contribute to the fund. But I also think that we're taking a very reasonable approach, and we encourage questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelby. Let's open the floor for questions.
I got a question. What's the state match?
So right now, actually for this year, the state does their distributions in November, and they're estimating that it'll be a 30% match in November. So that fund comes from a fee that's collected at the Registry of Deeds. So every time you record a deed, every time you refinance your house and record a new mortgage, you're paying that fund. Everyone pays that fund, regardless of whether or not you've adopted CPA or not. So for Westborough, we've been paying that fee for the past 20 years. It's been going to our neighboring communities. They recently increased the fee to provide more funding for the match for CPA. Governor Baker has also put additional CPA funding in his budget for the last few years as well. So it's pretty clear that at the state level that there's an interest in really trying to increase that match beyond the 30% that it is right now.
Okay, is 30% typical of what's been happening in the last few years, or?
It's gone up and down. So obviously when it was first passed and you had, 5 communities, it was 100%. It's gone down as more communities have adopted it. It also dipped around 2008. People weren't selling houses. They weren't recording things at the Registry of Deeds. But again, this year it's shot back up. It was 23% last year. But again, I think it's going to go up to 30 with the market the way it is.
My understanding is the schedule is, would come to Springtown meeting and then go in the general election in November to a ballot initiative.
Yep, exactly. So right now we're targeting to give a recommendation to the select board in either December or January. That would give them some time to kind of, decide whether they want to put it on the warrant or not for Springtown meeting, annual town meeting. It's a majority vote. So if a majority of voters approve at town meeting, it then goes on to the next regularly scheduled ballot, which would be November of 2022. And then again, if voters approve there, a majority of voters, we've adopted CPA.
So that implies that the first year of funding would be fiscal '24.
Yes, but there is also a way that if you write it into your ballot, you can start collecting money before then. So we could potentially start collecting money in January of 2023.
Sure.
So it would be part of FY23 and then going into FY24.
But in terms of getting approval, you'd have to go to FY23, you'd have to go to town meeting, and that would set the funding available in '24.
The project, so you would start collecting in January of '23, and then the first projects and distributions would probably be at annual town meeting of '24, yes.
Anyone else? Walter?
Okay, so philosophically, I think that one of the concerns is, okay, we're going to increase tax for basically a specific purpose. So my question is, as a committee, we may already be spending this much already in these areas by some of the examples I saw at your presentation. Have we done any analysis of that? Because in theory, let's say you add a 0.5% to the tax, we might be able to reduce the request for tax by a 0.5% because we're funding activities through this mechanism plus whatever the adder is. So obviously the anxiety you'll face by the public is the increase in tax. So I'm curious whether, like, we're already spending 2% of our money, of our tax dollars on these things already or something. So or maybe you don't know that now, but is that something that can be calculated by somebody?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly look at the past few years, projects that could have used CPA. It's sort of a little tough to tell because, so for instance, one thing that a lot of communities have done is rehab their municipal buildings with CPA funds. And obviously not the full cost of the building, but it's a significant portion of the project. So, could we have used CPA funds for this building, for Forbes building? Yes, we certainly could have. What that amount would be, who knows, We can guess at what we would have collected over the past few years of CPA funds. And again, we could kind of guess at projects we could have potentially funded. But I think, the way we look at this too is that a lot of times there are projects that don't make it to town meeting because they're maybe just a little too far out. They're things that people want, but, it doesn't quite fit within the town's budget. And so we see this as a way to kind of potentially do those projects and have it sort of removed from the town budget. And just, not fully removed from the budget, but have a sort of dedicated source of money for it.
That's the concern, because everybody wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die, right? So it's not a free lunch. You're paying this much, you're getting 30% on top of it. That's a great interest rate if you can get it. But they really have to be things you would have wanted to do anyway. They can't be, gee, we have this free money now, we can go do things that maybe we weren't going to do. So that's the anxiety part, or the tug and pull I feel is this is going to take things and put them into preordained buckets, which are all excellent things to spend money on. But I think you just have to be careful that doesn't necessarily mean, unless it's the right thing to do, that it's the right thing to do.
So just a couple points. I just want to be clear that it's, although it is additional money out of pocket, we can label it whatever it is, but it's not an additional tax. I just want to be clear for the public. So it's a surcharge based on the tax bills. So just as folks look at our website and understand, it's not a specific additional tax, like it's not specifically increasing the tax bill. At the end of the day, is it more money coming out of the pocket? Call it what you want, yes. So, but just
semantics at that point.
Well, no, I understand that, but
Seriously.
I understand that, but it's not. But it's also not just bucketed in to your tax bill. So it's a specific additional surcharge. So I agree.
Are you
but I
saying
just,
that your tax bill comes and it'll say this is your regular tax bill and this is your CPA bill as a
Yes.
separate line?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't
yes.
understand that
Yes,
completely either.
so
Okay.
fully agree with you, Walter, that the concern would be, oh, well, now we have this money to spend, just let's kind of like add other projects. So I think the same sort of structure and intention of creating the Affordable Housing Trust that we did, which is a very thoughtful process. I mean, I look at the CPC, which would be formed, should we pass this, in the same way. They will it's regulated, it's very structured, and in how the monies must be spent. The other thing is that the money doesn't have to be spent every year. So the money can roll over. So it's not like, okay, we collected, just pick a number, like $400,000, we gotta find a way to spend it. No, it has to be, and keep me honest here, it has to be, 10% has to be allocated to affordable housing, 10% to historic preservation, and 10% to open space and recreation. The other 70% of what has been collected can be allocated to any of those buckets, but none of it has to be spent, and every dollar must come before town meeting every year, or, you know, on whatever schedule that the CPC so determines, to then determine if Westborough wants to spend that money. So there are, what I also like is that there are checks and balances, but there is certainly that risk of, wow, we have this huge pot of money over here and we're not spending it. But if we look at the work of the Affordable Housing Trust and what Westborough residents have, and employers have consistently said of, we need workforce housing, we need more affordable housing for the, I'll call it the bookend ranges, there's definitely opportunity to kind of enhance those goals, so. Sorry to
So
turn on.
can I just ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So assuming this goes the distance and we approve it at town meeting, the surcharge is in place for however long
Yeah.
it's in place until the town meeting removes it or changes it.
And it's 5
Is-
years. It
Okay,
can't be
so
changed.
is that even in years when we have excess CPA money that we are not going to use?
Yeah, I think you would have to just spend it out at that point.
No, I mean,
Or,
it
You
goes
would not-
into the
it would not
CPA
change.
fund every year. You can choose not to spend it. I don't know, I think there's some limit on how long you can not spend it, but
I don't know that there is.
I don't know that there's a legislated limit, so.
One,
Yeah.
one other newly added aspect to the legislation is the ability to use this money for trail use. So I certainly know that on future warrants, I mean, the select board has not heard the updated feasibility study for the Wall Trail, the multi-purpose trail. That is a significant project that the town may choose to undertake at some point in the future. Should we choose to undertake that, monies from this through that open space and recreation could also be allocated. So it just, again, as we look at kind of projects that we may or may not do, I mean, I don't think Westborough has any end to creativity of how to spend money. I think there's no doubt about that. And I know you all are faced with that every day. But there is an opportunity to sort of, apply those funds.
So
Mike.
just one more
Yeah.
thing. The town meeting already voted last year or the year before to allocate a significant amount of the Pulte money
Yep.
toward affordable housing. That's a lot of money. And we're just going to be adding on to that amount through this CPA, or are we going to say, are we going to think about
So-
that because we have that money coming in? Maybe we won't earmark any of the CPA money for affordable housing.
So the legislation requires that 10% of what you collect
Automatically.
has to
Yes.
be to those. The balance, the 70% is up to the CPC in terms of what projects to approve, through their process. But
Okay.
it doesn't, it really will sit there until such a project. So another, project, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the historical element, there may be opportunity with the library. As we think about that renovation, maybe, again, that project may precede us passing this and having funds and all of that, but, yeah.
I just,
Have you done an estimate of,
one point on the affordable housing thing too. So if I remember correctly, our affordable housing trust has an income limit of 125% of the area-wide median income. CPA funds are limited to 100%. So you could be getting sort of two different kinds of housing, or, serving two different populations there. If our affordable housing trust is just funding that 100 to 125% AMI versus CPA, which is funding under 100% of AMI. So you could, serving two different populations, really.
Go ahead.
have you done an estimate of what the first year's revenue would be from a
Yep.
0.5%?
Yep.
Because my quick math is probably wrong.
On, we've got it.
It's, Yeah, it is around a little over 400.
$400,000, okay, so
Yeah.
it's in the $400,000 ballpark, right, okay.
And that's based on,
Was your math right?
I was a little high.
and that's based on FY21
that's-
numbers, so I don't know if this is showing anywhere.
I think we need the expert.
Paul, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I have a question that's related, because I see the 417,000 projected for 21 or whatever. But you mentioned that we're paying into a fund and not getting that return. Do we know what the dollars on that have been?
We don't, I mean, that's state's registry deeds information, and we've talked about that, if there was some way to figure that out, but it's, what have the real estate transactions been in Westborough for the past 20 years? That's a little tough to figure.
Well, even on
Plus
a-
refinances, I
one
think.
year, if it's being paid, we can't get that?
I mean, we can certainly check with the registry of deeds or DOR and see if they have an idea of the number, but.
But it's not just based on Westborough's activity. This is based on statewide DOR and real estate transactions, so.
But if it's 20 to 30% kind of range, and you're looking at $400,000, that math I can do. So that's $80,000 to $120,000 approximately, right? So it's not, I mean, these are not enormous numbers compared to, I don't know, $110, $120 million budget, not including capital and such other things, so, that's.
I think we
and-
need to be a little careful about that, because they're not enormous numbers now in conversation, but that's a bag of, or half a bag this week of groceries for somebody.
Yep.
I think we need to be a little careful about, we start nickel and diming and we end up with that.
And that's why, one of the exemptions that we've been looking at is for low-income residents and low and moderate-income senior residents. So that is an option. They would be completely exempted from this surcharge, so.
Well, I'm sorry, but, forgive me, Chris, I just want to add one thing. We know we have a wealthy population, and I don't think that we can make the assumption that even though there is wealth in the town, there are people that aren't still struggling. Okay?
Yeah.
Even with that,
Right. And we share your concern. That's why we're looking at the lowest possible percentage. As I said, it would be, when I first talked about this, 20 years ago or so, people thought, oh, it's going to be hundreds of dollars of taxes. We don't want to do that. And I totally agree with that, and that's not the case now. It is, we're looking at 0.05%, which will come up to about $50 a household a year. And people are exempt if they're a low income or really can't afford it as elderly. But I wanted to say to Walter, I shared his concern right from the beginning, and it seems that Westborough does fund things like open space and just did Day Pray and Zwicker. But we have also interviewed and questioned all the departments that are involved and got their feedback. Open space has no money left in their fund. CPA could provide that in a very important way. Historic preservation, which I'm very, very involved with and care about, gets no funds, no budget. How do we fund something that we really care about historically? Well, it's going to be low on your list, probably, but under Community Preservation Act, important things would be funded. For instance, I'm interested in a historic trail around Westborough and doing a QR code at very important places where people can find out why it's important at the high school and what happened to the Rice boys that got kidnapped at that point and when. Various things that are important. Yes, we have affordable housing, but fund, which is really important. But there are other ways of building affordable housing that may not be addressed other than using some CPA funds. So I agreed with Walter that we care about these areas and have spent money on these areas. But we as a committee also went to these departments, talked to housing, talked to historic preservation, talked to open space, and they told us that they do need money, particularly open space. Historic preservation has none as far as being budgeted, and the Affordable Housing Trust is a different way of looking at it. So I do believe that we've done our homework, and this is how we came up with what we did, and that we want the percentage to be reasonable to people too.
Any other questions? So let me ask you, since you, can we dig into the numbers a little bit? Your calculation was on the average tax. Did you do any calculation on the extremes?
Leah did the calculations. So I don't know, I don't think she did any calculations on the extremes, but we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm, yeah, the information should be available from
Yeah.
the tax assessor's
Yep.
office,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because some families,
Yeah, I
Are
mean,
gonna
obviously, that's
pay-
the average, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
above and below.
Yep.
And speaking to your exemptions, so if we exempt seniors and we exempt low income, I'm certain you've identified a threshold for what low income might be?
It's set by the state,
Okay.
so it's, low income is 100%, or 80% of the area-wide median income, and moderate income is 100%, I believe, yeah.
The tax is on residential, it's on commercial, it's on industrial.
Yep.
Within the realm of residential, we have a number of multifamily dwellings in
Mhm.
town. Is that going to be that single surcharge for one multifamily building? Or
It's
is it going to take?
whatever
into
the tax bill is, yeah. If
Whatever
it's
the
one
tax bill
property
is.
owner,
Okay.
yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is the multifamily owner can lay that off on the tenants. The industrial and commercial can lay it off on their customers. The only owners that can't lay that surcharge off every year is the residential owner. But yet they're also, if they do business with a commercial or industrial entity in town, they're gonna be picking up part of that cost as well. Again, I know we're talking small numbers,
Mhm.
but, pennies make dollars, as they say.
Yeah, sure.
So that's something that, you might want to take a look at.
Mhm.
Um,
Unfortunately, there's not much we can do in that sense. Communities with a split tax rate, you can fully exempt commercial industrial class properties, but we don't have split tax rate, so.
No, I'm not suggesting you fully exempt. it.
No, I mean, I'm saying that is something that is kind of accounted for in the CPA program, but unfortunately, because we don't have a split
Yeah.
tax rate, we can't do that.
So I also noticed, looking at the map you gave us, that there's a lot of white. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of cities and a lot of towns, I should say, that have not, in the last 20 years, adopted the CPA. Any idea why that's the case?
I mean, I guess why hasn't Westborough adopted it, you know?
Yeah, well, they're still paying into it, just like we are.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, at this point, it's 187 communities, so it's more than half of the 351 in the state. It's definitely gained traction in recent years. Obviously, you've larger communities like Boston that's recently adopted it about 2-3 years ago. So a lot more communities have begun to adopt it because the popularity has been shown, the use and purpose has been shown. There's only been 3 communities that have held a vote to repeal CPA after they've adopted it, and none of those have passed. So of the 187 communities that have adopted CPA, they have adopted it, and they've seen the usefulness of it, and nobody's voted to repeal it at this point, so.
Any other questions or comments?
That certainly seems like a good figure of merit, because if the communities didn't like it, it would get voted out.
Yep. And I mean, obviously, it's been around for 21 years at this point, so, yeah.
So a simple way to look at this is if you pay a surtax of $40, if, in essence, the town gets 52 at the 30%. So it's a way of adding, but you have these other
Yeah.
constraints.
And, the other thing is you can use this for state and federal matching grants. You can use this as your match. So it's another good way to, bring in more money for the community rather than going to town meeting and asking for $15,000. You can go to CPA, you're getting $30 from, or, getting 30% from the state to begin with, and then you're getting it as a match for a grant.
So, okay, I have two more questions, if that's
Please,
okay?
go
Okay. So first question, I thought I heard in one of your meetings, it's not an exemption of all seniors, it's seniors that meet certain criteria, probably income or something, not?
Yeah.
So it isn't just everybody over 65
No,
doesn't pay?
no.
So I just wanted
there
to
we
make
go.
sure you knew that, because that's a
Yeah.
pretty important point.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so these are the income limits. So the low income is regardless of age, you're exempted. And then the moderate income, and then for seniors, it's low and moderate income. So it's two different numbers. But again, it's based on the AMI for Westborough.
And it's complete exemption, or it's a sliding
It's a complete,
scale
it's complete exemption.
Okay.
Yep.
And we don't have, I know the next question is going to be, do we know how many people will fall into that? We don't have that number. We don't have a sense of that.
Yeah, I think you'll hear from some of them that are slightly above.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Okay, so my second question is, most things we spend money on, we have to bring to town meeting to approve. But I think the way you just phrased, for matching grants, do they not have to go to
No,
town
everything,
meeting?
so the
Or that's
process.
still at town
Yep,
meeting?
the process, and usually this
Just
is
the
how
same.
it works in a town. You have your CPC, which is the committee that oversees the CPA funds. They usually begin taking applications in the fall. And then through the fall and the winter, they review all the applications that come in. They consider, do we have the budget for it? They have to make a community preservation plan and update it regularly. So they'll look and say, do the applications fit with what we've put in our plan? And then everything comes to town meeting. So they'll put together a slate of proposals, like we put together a budget. They'll put together a slate of proposed CPA projects, and they come to town meeting and get voted on at town meeting. So everything.
So what you were saying was not that you still don't have to go to town meeting, you're saying, when you show up at town meeting, you say, but we have this money.
Yes.
And it's not gonna raise your taxes otherwise than what you paid for the surcharge.
Exactly,
I
yeah.
would say that the parallel might be when the schools or any other entity is eligible for, DPW is eligible for a grant, they're saying we need 10,000, but we expect 30,000, and so the total warrant article is 40, and this is how we want to fund it.
Anyone else?
I have a question on the exemption.
Sorry, didn't see. I'm looking here.
Paul.
I apologize.
there
If
he
you can hear me, on the exemption, I didn't quite hear, is that part of the program, or is that an option that may or may not be part of it?
Yep, so there's 3 or 4 exemptions that the state offers. So the first is that you exempt the first $100,000 of valuation from all properties, and so that's one that we are considering. The second is for low-income residents, the total exemption. Third is low and moderate-income senior residents, total exemption. So again, we're considering those as well. And then the fourth exemption is a complete exemption for commercial and industrial properties in communities that have a split tax rate. So again, the community decides which exemptions you want. You can go with none of them, you can go with all of them. It's up to the community. You put it in the warrant language and you vote on it along with the surcharge percentage.
So you're going to propose some menu of these options, and then we'll either vote them yes or no, or even modify it on town floor, I guess.
Exactly. So when we will ultimately make a recommendation to the select board and say, we think Westborough should adopt CPA, we think they should do this percentage, they should do these exemptions, and then the select board will make a decision from there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent.
Beth?
Yeah, hi. I have sort of a compound question, because I think there's some things I may have misheard over time with this. The money that everybody is paying, regardless of whether or not Westborough as a town participates, that's money that we pay on deeds when we purchase a house or refinance a house. Is that correct?
You were a little unclear, so I may not have heard correctly.
She said,
Yeah, so we're paying into it. Westborough has been paying those fees at the Registry of Deeds, regardless of whether we've adopted CPA or not. So this has been around for 21 years. We've been paying those fees for 21 years.
And then this new fee you're asking is based on our real estate taxes, not on the Registry of Deeds. So we're not impacting people who are purchasing a house, more at the point of purchase of deeds, but in line with their taxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's across the whole town.
Yes, yeah. So I think there was a precursor program to CPA that was done down the Cape, which is what CPA is based on, and that was a real estate transfer tax. And so that was a direct tax on the sale of property. This is not that. This is a surcharge on your real estate taxes. Yes.
Yeah, that's what when I first heard we were doing this, I thought it was that, but your presentation was clear it wasn't.
Yes.
I mean, in your slide. So
So
it was interesting because that's my memory of it from years ago.
And so it was, like I said, it was adopted down the Cape, and many of the communities down the Cape did that initially, and then converted to CPA. And what Chris had mentioned earlier was brought to town meeting was actually based on that. It wasn't CPA as we know it today, and those programs were usually just limited to open space. They did not include the affordable housing or preservation
There are communities
components.
on the Cape who still charge as much as 2% on a real estate transfer that goes to the town for it doesn't go into CPA, because it goes into a CPA-like
Exactly.
suspension fund.
Yep.
Interesting.
See?
Just a clarification. So I heard that this is surcharge is only for 5 years, and then at that moment we review it again and decide again?
So whenever if you adopt CPA, you have to leave it in place for 5 years at least. And then after that, you can keep going. Or if you want to, again, repeal it, or if you want to change the surcharge, or if you want to change the exemptions, you have to go back through the same process that you did to adopt it. So say, we do 0.5% and we leave it for 5 years and we decide that it worked really well and we want to go up to 1%, you would have to go back through town meeting and a ballot to go up to 1% or whatever. Yeah.
But you said it's based on valuation of the home.
It's based on the real estate tax bill. So it's not on the valuation, no.
It's indirectly on the valuation because the tax bill is
Yes.
on the valuation.
It's your valuation minus 100K times whatever our tax rate is.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So here you can see the average valuation is $530,000. We're talking about that first $100,000 exemption, so you would take $100,000 off the valuation of every property. That brings you down the average of $430,000. That tax bill is around $8,000, and so then the surcharge is calculated on that $8,000 number, not the valuation number.
So this is a rhetorical question, but if someone who's watching this wanted to see all your slides, where would they find that?
So we have a page on the town's website. So you go to the town's website under boards and committees. We do have a Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee page there. And then Westborough TV has been kind enough to record some of our presentations. I was on Frank and Mary the other day. So you can also check those out on their YouTube as well.
Thank you.
So, just to stay with the numbers for one more second. God forbid, but let's assume that taxes go up every year.
Yes, that number would go
That
up.
means that percentage is obviously, that 40 in real dollars.
Yes.
It's going to be more.
Yes, correct, yep.
The percent stays the same,
Yeah,
the dollar amount
Yeah.
obviously changes.
because I looked at some of the projections for other towns, and some of them are raising an awful lot of money with
Yeah,
higher percentages.
here it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so these are obviously, Grafton adopted it in 2002. So they've been collecting money for about 20 years now. And obviously, their home values in 2002 are a lot different than they are in 2021. So yes, that money's gone up over the 20 years that they've
Then
had
the
it.
question comes up, what are you going to do? What would Westborough do with all that money?
Yeah. I think, one of the things we've seen, and again, as we've talked to some of the other boards and committees, is that they do have projects available. You know, we went to Active Transportation Safety Committee the other day, and they've been talking about their planning process, even beyond the B-Wall that Shelby mentioned, you know, other projects that they would like to do that would fit the CPA program. Parks and Recreation are going through a planning process as well, and they had a number of projects that they thought would fit well with CPA. So they are out there for Westborough.
So any project that has to go through the Capital Expenditures Committee, right, has to meet certain criteria. Is this not a way to getting around the Capital Expenditures Committee?
So Mike, that's a great question, and I think that what I would like to see if this were brought forward and instituted in Westborough is that there has to be connectivity between the processes. So you can't sort of say, well, I'm gonna toss the ball over here into this hoop and then also over here into this hoop. I mean, you might have parallel tracks, but there is a very scripted process for CPC as there is for the capital improvement process. So it could follow both tracks, but there has to be transparency among those processes. But I hear.
Well, it's a conversation that
Well,
came
I
up,
mean-
you know,
Yeah,
You couldn't buy a police cruiser on CPA money.
well, correct.
no, but you can build,
But you could say, we renovated the Forbes building. The Forbes building was a historic building. We paid we paid extra money to the contractor in order to renovate the Great Hall. I mean, we brought the Great Hall back to greatness, right? And believe me, that was not cheap. And we could have subsidized that with CPA money, because that was a historic, this room here, we thought we had brought it back to greatness. Not
And now
clear
we
that
got
we
it.
did, but.
well, yeah, and I understand the point, but for example, just the splash pad that we're talking about.
Splash pads
Right.
always come up, yes.
If that is, you know, meets the criteria for a capital expenditure, it's gotta go through the CapEx committee, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like Shelby said, that's a process that, you know, the CPC would have to work out with the other committees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes,
We have,
I think
is it,
it's not clear what the guidelines are for projects going to the Capital Expenditure Committee.
they're in the budget this year.
Well, historically, the guidelines have been if you're buying equipment. If you're building buildings, that doesn't go to the Capital Expenditure Committee. When we're building a school, we're building buildings, we're renovating buildings, that has not historically gone to the Capital Expenditure
Historically, it
Committee.
hasn't, but if you go
Well,
back
but-
into the budget book from last year, I think there's specific criteria that have to be met
Right, and those
for any
criteria,
project in
when
town.
those criteria aren't gonna change, and again, those criteria were set by the Board of Selectmen. And if they change them, they're gonna change, but if they don't change them, they won't change.
No, I just want to make sure that, as Shelby said, there is transparency, because we've got the Pulte money coming in, we have ARPA money, and now we're talking about more capital coming into the town.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to, speaking now as a select board member, we
Please.
have to have very open and transparent conversations about those policies and updating them. So if we bring on CPC or CPA and the CPC, too many acronyms, then we need to make sure that our policies reflect the process by which we're going to evaluate projects and potentially fund them, because they can't, operate in silos. I would never support that.
But if I understand correctly, when the CPC committee, the appointing authority will be the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
And if the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority, they will also be the authority that sets the charter and the boundaries, if you will, the boundary conditions of the charter. Other than this, there are some statutory boundary conditions for CPA money, but in my experience in other communities, they're very flexible.
Who, the state or the other communities?
No, the CPA,
The CPA.
the statutory requirements on CPA spending appear to me, as an outsider, having helped to apply for some of that money, to be pretty flexible.
Yeah.
And-
No,
So the Board of Selectmen gets to set boundaries and a charter and gets to select the people who come and review and make these proposals to the town meeting. Again, you basically can't spend money without town meeting approval. And it's not 100% true, but It's true at the 85% level. You can't spend money in this community or any Massachusetts community
Right.
without town meeting approval.
So I don't want to create an eye roll moment, but just, we've been to a number of committees and boards. We've offered some public information sessions. We have a minimum of 2 scheduled in late September and early October. We're trying to get a 3rd scheduled because the 2 that I just referenced are evening sessions, so we're trying to work with Alma at the senior center to do one during the day so that we can accommodate those that would be more comfortable during the day. But the feedback so far, honestly, surprisingly, has been, why haven't we done, and this is from other boards and committees, so kind of, if you will, your peers, are my peers. Why haven't we done this already? Why is it only 0.5%? Why aren't we going for more? And we love the exemptions. Is that pretty much sums it up? So just, again, not trying to have it sort of be like, well, therefore I want to be like Mikey, or Mike, or some other person. But just so that there's visibility, so you understand kind of, because I certainly wouldn't expect you to have been at those other meetings.
Anyone else?
That's good. That's very informative.
Okay.
You guys,
Well,
Closing
yeah.
comments?
No, I mean, so right now, like Shelby said, we have 2 sort of more public meetings. Again, we've been coming to these meetings, but we're sort of holding our own. The first will be Wednesday, September 29th at 7 p.m. across the street. And then the second will be Thursday, October 7th at 7 p.m. in the fire station. And then, like Shelby said, we'll be looking to do something during the day for folks who feel more comfortable coming out during the day. And we do on our website, that we have on the town website, we do have a sort of CPA quiz and survey up there that we would love for folks to do, so we can kind of get an idea of where people are at when thinking about CPA. But other than that, yeah, we're just looking to hear from folks, and again, like Shelby said, get an idea of the surcharge and, what people think of that percentage, what people think of CPA in general, how Westborough might be able to use it. Again, we're still kind of fact-finding, and we'll be doing that probably until November, December, so, yeah.
So you've given us I jotted down a couple sort of homework items to follow up on that we can include back to the board and certainly follow up with you on.
Good.
that's great.
Chris, anything?
Yes,
Good.
I hope that you decide that this is a positive thing. Perhaps only 187 towns have done this, but the towns in our neighbors all
Yeah,
have.
right.
And I think we're just as good at Shrewsbury.
And they have lower tax rates.
So, and you know how the town manager always uses a new selection of, we do, the schools and the town manager use a peer
The dashboard?
dashboard
Yep.
communities?
Yep.
Have we
So
thought about doing those specific towns too?
Yep, so we do have that information in Leah's information that she's put together for us, yes.
Cool.
Because that was one of the first things we did, was figure out
Yeah.
what they did, so, yep.
And I think
That makes a lot of sense.
anecdotally, I would say just about every one of those communities has adopted it.
And I believe most of them are at higher percentages.
Microphone, please.
Beth?
Oh, we
Please
were,
ask Ross how to use the mic.
I'll use the next one.
Oh, Shelby was too far from the mic.
yeah.
I didn't say anything of value, Beth. You didn't miss it.
Folks, thank you so much for
Yes,
coming
thank
tonight.
you.
Very helpful, very
Thank you.
informative.
Yep.
Would love to
Appreciate
stay
it.
and go into the planning board if they're still open.
The master plan. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on with the agenda. I'd like to take a first pass at the version 2 of the town warrant. Version 3 came out today.
Well, let's stay
But
with 2. 'cause
Let's stay with
Three.
2. And to be honest with you, I haven't opened 3 yet. But what I'd like to do is not spend a lot of time and dig in on a lot of detail, but try to go through each one and initially see which articles might require the presence of some department manager or the town manager or finance director and so forth. So that once we identify those, I can reach out to those folks and start arranging their presence at one of our scheduled meetings. Is that okay with all of you?
Maybe
makes
as a
sense.
first pass, we ought to get our liaisons to talk to all those folks and bring back
That-
the information and see if it's satisfactory?
That, before we get them through, before
I
we
mean,
get them in front of us, yes,
I mean, there's some,
absolutely. Yeah.
Mike, this is Paul. The other thing is, we have this meeting on the 23rd. If those answers are gonna come there, we don't need to do it twice, right? Or we can maybe make them more fruitful too?
I'm not sure whether or not they're gonna cover the warrant on the 23rd. The way it was proposed is that it's gonna be looking at the impacts on Westborough of other projects that are coming down the pike, like the library, for example. We haven't, the finance team, the town manager, hasn't finalized all of the details yet on that meeting. But I'm not, again, I could be wrong, but as far as I understand, we're not going to be looking at the warrant at that point. But there will certainly be some department folks there, and I imagine that they'll be able to fill us in on some details if we wish. Okay?
Okay, so that's too bad, because a couple of years ago when we did that, it did serve that purpose of not dragging everyone down
Yeah.
a second and third time or whatever. So I guess we're not repeating that process, but this is a different one.
my understanding was the meeting on the 23rd is to deal with next year's budget, not this
Yeah.
year's budget?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be
Future
appropriate
impacts.
to drag people into talking about this year's budget when the focus of the meeting is next year's budget? I mean,
Yeah, it's not serving that function, although I guess maybe we did that for the spring town meeting. Was
Yeah.
one.
The
It's
23rd is
unlike the
budget
full-
summit, and-
Hang on, one at a time. Hank?
23rd is a budget summit, and my understanding was it's to review what when I was managing budgets, was accustomed to calling the budget advice package. When I had to have people do budgets, I used to give them a package that said, hey, when you go to do your budget, here's some advice on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, or what to expect. And that's my understanding, is we're looking at that's an FY '23 budget summit.
Mhm.
And we'll really get into the weeds if we start talking about FY '22.
And it's an evening meeting too, folks. So I'm
So,
sure they don't want
You
to,
know, we have 2 or 3 meetings between now and that meeting. I mean, we've got a couple of meetings before the warrant even closes that our liaisons can go out and talk to folks and kind of bring back the first order information about why they're asking for money and whether it makes sense. And then if we still need somebody to come talk to us, that'd be worth getting them in here.
that's a good first step. But let's go through them anyway and identify something that identify those that have popped out.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a couple that are so impactful that we really need to have somebody
Yeah.
talk in detail.
Okay. So the first article is the appropriation of the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure. It's the DPW. This looks like, to me, a perfunctory.
Yeah, somebody's giving us money, right?
Somebody's giving us money.
I'll take it.
Somebody's giving me money, I always say
It's-
yes, right?
It's from the tax on the ride share, or not the
Yep.
ride share, the
And
Lyft
then-
and Uber.
I'm sorry, Walter?
It's just money they collect from
Yeah,
Lyft
from
and Uber,
Uber
but
and-
we have to accept it probably,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that I don't think we need.
Right. I
More.
don't think we need to.
Well, I
The-
want to know where the 10 cents came in.
Are you the liaison to
Yeah.
the,
I am not, but if you could
No.
get back to me on that 10 cents.
That's a Hank problem. That's a Hank problem. The finance director, finance department has proposed paying the remainder of the salary of the grants procurement officer that is going to be hired shortly. The total salary on that is $90,000. This is pretty straightforward.
well, I guess I have a question on
Yeah.
that. So that, this person is not hired
Yeah,
currently?
They're,
'Cause
or they're about to start.
they're about to start shortly. Let's say they've made room in the downstairs office spaces for that person.
Said it was
Okay,
week-
but they say in here that it was initially funded through funds, but they're gonna expire in December. Okay, so the September through December is gonna be those funds, and
Correct.
Right, but
This is
it's
for
really
3
turning-
months.
Turning a temporary position into a permanent position, right? Which means that it's gonna hit every budget for now and forever for the rest of your natural life.
Yes. What?
So it's,
But it's something that we all.
We all approved
agreed
it at town
Yeah,
meeting.
we-
Something that needed to
we
be
pushed for
done.
that, we pushed for this to happen
Yeah,
because
Absolutely.
we're wasting a lot of staff
Yeah.
time doing pretty skilled work.
My interest was if they had already been working since July to get an update on
Sure.
how's it going and stuff, but since they're just starting now, there's no point in getting that information
Um,
out. So that's a no.
Okay, Article 3 is OPEB, and I think we've talked OPEB quite a bit. I think we have a good understanding of what's happening and some of the proposed funding mechanisms for it. So I think if we're going to talk about this one, probably when the town manager and finance director are with us again, we could see where that is coming to. Right now, they're going to make a funding mechanism proposal to the select board next week, or at least let them present them with the proposed funding mechanism, and see where the select board fits. Okay. Article 4, school committee.
Yeah, I think it's worth getting a heads up from this. I mean, my understanding, as cursory as it is that the schools have been hit by an unexpectedly large number of English language learners due to population moving into the town,
Yep.
causing them strain and stress on their staffing. So that, even though this article only funds the rest of this year, it's a precursor of what's to come, and it'd be good to at least get the background on what's happening there. Again, it's probably a 10 or 15-minute conversation, not an hour, but just what's going on here, what's changing in the demographics that's causing us to have to increase the budget.
But it'd be
Well-
nice to know
I think
specific numbers.
Want to add that the schools are growing, the population dipped down and it's growing back in general, and it's just that English language learners are a portion of the school population that's growing, and therefore they need more services, but the school population as a whole is growing again. And they expect to be back at 4,000 students in a year or two.
Based on a conversation that was had at the finance team meeting this week, it really seems to be, this English language learner issue seems to be impacting the high school. We've taken in a number of, I guess they call it interrupted education students with English language issues, and they've shifted an FTE from one of the other schools into the high school, and this is really to replace that person. I want to say Mill Pond, but don't quote me on it. But so that's the issue that's going on. They're shifting personnel to meet a demand at the high school, and then backfilling that FTE at the school that was affected.
And it has multi-year implications.
So
And it does have multi-year implications.
So this discussion, is that something the liaisons will do, or are we bringing in the school superintendent for that? I guess?
I think you need to get somebody from the schools, because, I mean,
Okay.
Beth or I could go to the school committee meeting, but we can't give you the richness, the detail of what's going on in the
Right.
background.
So that's,
And,
I want influx defined. Influx,
Yeah,
know,
how
is
many
kind of one of
and
those.
where and-
No, I'm saying I want numbers.
yeah,
Would be
honestly,
easier, yeah.
how many and and gee, what's, something's
I
changing.
thought you were gonna define it for me now. I was like, no, I know what it means.
Something's changing in the demographics. I mean, clearly there's been a shift in demographics that's big enough. The school's usually pretty good at anticipating who the population's gonna be, and there's been a shift in the demographics that'd be good to understand.
Okay.
All right, so I'll,
and there's a second position here too, right?
yeah,
which
that's
we're
for
gonna
the
Support.
Just,
support function for the business office. We had some discussion on that. I'd rather they speak directly to it
okay.
when they're here. So I'll invite the superintendent and whoever Amber feels would also be appropriate to come along with her. Next, Article 5 is the DPW asking for funds to clean the fire station. Is-
Probably a good idea, to clean the fire
Probably.
station, right?
Melanie, do you have any?
I did,
Any
I actually
insight?
spoke to the chief this week, and this is, they're one of the few facilities that didn't have any sort of contract for cleaning. And this sum is for the continuation through the end of the year. And, you know, sanitation-wise, he discussed the fact that the common areas, people coming in from the general public is one of the focuses. Because if you go into our fire station, you could eat off the floor. They keep it so clean. But, you know, you can't always control what's coming in from outside.
Do we really need to bring the well,
No,
if at some point we invite the DPW in,
If there's
not for
questions,
this money.
if people want to feed them to me, I'll go
Yeah.
get them answered.
okay,
It's a small enough number too, Mike, that
yeah.
it seems reasonable.
Speaking of
Um,
the fire department,
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of fire, as if on cue.
Yes.
Article 6 is the police department requesting a position of lieutenant. And Article 7 is requesting a electric vehicle, which appears to be designated for that particular position. I have not had a chance to talk with the chief, and but my intention is to do that. So if, in my conversation, we think it's appropriate for the chief to come in and talk about this, because this appears to be a staffing change from what we had heard last year.
I mean, we were on a staffing plan, right?
Yeah, we're on a
I'd really
staffing
like to
plan.
understand whether it's changing the staffing plan, or whether we're
Yeah.
accelerating the staffing plan, or what's going on here.
Well, we also had a lot of retirees last year.
Yep, we did. So I want to chat with the chief first, and then if we feel necessary, we'll bring him in and talk about this. Okay? Let's jump to Article 8, which is the golf course budget adjustment. Hank,
Yeah.
any insight?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get Andrew to, we kind of got some split responsibility here, because he's been handling the recreation folks. I'll close with him in the next day or two on whether the two of us go, or whether I just go. And I'll go talk to them, and my concern is, what's the long-term financial plan? What's changed with the golf course? And the golf course reserve, the retained earnings had gone to zero, and now the retained earnings are substantial, and why are we giving away the retained earnings? Do we need them, and do we have a long-range plan for the retained earnings? So I will talk all of that with the rec folks and bring back, and then if there's more questions, we'll get the rec folks in.
Thank you. That's 8, 9, and 10.
The three are kind of all wrapped together.
Article 11 and Article 12 are kind of wrapped together as well, the fire alarm infrastructure and the
Dispatch software.
the dispatch software. Melanie, any insight on that yet?
You know what, we didn't discuss these because they seem pretty self-explanatory, but if you need me to go back, I can certainly.
Okay, you might want to circle back and bring us a little bit. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd like to avoid bringing in department heads
Yeah.
if we can, only to, allow them to concentrate on what they're supposed to be doing, right? I know managing money is part of their responsibility, but let's see if we can resolve questions as suggested with liaison.
Just be good to be sure that when we centralize dispatch between fire and police, we've got common dispatch. Be sure that whatever they're bringing in supports fire and police, right?
Right.
I'm sure it does, but.
Yep.
Sometimes you gotta ask the dumb questions.
Pick the right girl.
Obvious questions is probably a better characterization.
that took me a second.
Article 13, I'm glad we have some levity tonight. Article 13, tuition reimbursement, I think, is straightforward.
Routine article,
Yeah, it's a routine article. Article 14, And I understand that there was a new article coming to, regarding a generator for the DPW as well. So pretty substantial numbers. Hank, can you,
I'll talk
reach
to
out to
Chris,
him?
I'll go visit with him, and I'll look at the new warrant and go visit with him.
all right. Article 15. That's a non-financial question, article,
I'm completely baffled as to what we're trying to accomplish.
so.
I think
See, a
we're
lot of
trying to
prohibition.
sell beers on the golf course, right?
So we're
Yeah,
trying to
it's-
sell beer on the golf course?
Or if you had a special event, like we do sometimes, these celebrations where they want to set up a beer tent, I think, at,
Bay State Commons.
it's
or
like
something.
on the
Yeah.
commons or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd just be good to get an understanding of what are we really trying to accomplish.
right,
with this.
let's,
That's Christie, I think,
yes,
right?
Chrissy, we'll probably want to speak with the town manager and finance director again anyway, as this warrant gets closer to be closed. Article 16 is a zoning bylaw amendment, as is 17. Does anybody, again, a lot of detail with respect to off-premise signs. Does anybody want to ask the folks from planning board
Yeah,
to come in?
I'm the liaison.
Oh, Paul, you're the liaison?
Yep.
Okay, then you could fill us in on the details.
Yeah, I mean, when I read these, they looked pretty harmless, but there may be more implications than, on face value.
Okay. So next meeting, I'm sure you'll have some information for us.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, that's it in terms of the articles of the warrant right now. Monday evening, we can talk about the next version if there are some significant changes there. So right now, all we have is a request for invitation for the superintendent et al. And we'll see where we are with police and DPW
Yeah,
Fire.
and fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
And then we'll move from there. If we could, we've got, it's a short time horizon between now and Monday's meeting. So rather than, let's look for answers on those by Thursday,
Okay.
okay? All right. Any other questions on the warrant? Concerns?
yeah, can you please
Yes,
send us
Beth.
the new version 3?
Can you say that again, please?
Can you please send us the new version 3?
Yeah, it came in today, and I just didn't have a chance to read it and get it out to you all, but I will send it out with the material for Monday's meeting. Okay? All right, any liaison reports
Any chance we can take action on the DPW request
on Monday?
today or Monday? Got some feedback from Chris on it, and the issue is that there's tree work downtown that needs to be done, and it needs to be done before the end of October. So it needs to be contracted, and we can't wait till town meeting to go get approval for the money, and so, the sooner we can either decide one way or the other, then they can take action and go place the contract.
Yeah, for those of you, the DPW requested additional funds for that tree work that we passed at the town meeting in June. And seems that the bids came in substantially higher.
Yeah, like 50%.
Yeah.
I mean, non-trivial.
Yeah.
I mean, we had $21,000 and the bids came in like 31,000 plus or minus. And
So there's a request to take it out of
so we're
AFC
gonna
reserve?
Take it out of reserve.
Yeah.
This
So-
was an article,
Ah.
it was not a budget
Yeah.
item, it was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
article, and
So we can
And again,
consider
the
that
time- the-
Monday?
yeah.
Because I think we would have to post that, right?
No,
in the
you don't have to
agenda?
post it, no.
No, it will be on the agenda. The agenda will be
Right,
posted
but
tomorrow.
that's what I mean,
And so Monday,
not on this
But
agenda.
you can, I don't believe we have to post it, the specific action item on the agenda in order to take action.
well, I mean, even if we approve it tonight, which I'm a little hesitant in doing.
Monday's fine.
I'd like to, In fact, if you want details, I can send you all out a copy of the
Bid.
the request and the bid that came in. Okay? Which I will do.
And
And then we could deal with it Monday.
if folks have questions, if you feed them to me, I'll make sure we have answers.
Yep.
But, again, we wouldn't be doing it, except we gotta get the work done before the fall's over, and we really can't wait to go to the town meeting and then get through town meeting, and then we're basically in November before we can place the contract, and it's too late.
No, I concur with that. Yeah. Okay, any other liaison reports?
I'd actually
Melanie?
do, with regard to fire. So, oh, and I also got in touch with the new health department, the head of the health department. So, made a phone introduction, and I'm going to try and hook up with her. She's got a lot going on, so understandable, it's a new position. With regard to fire, so we approved funding for stuff like a new fire truck, ambulance. However, these things are being grossly delayed because of manufacturing issues. And you hear it across the board. Anything related to manufacturing is being delayed. So they are going to move some stuff up into the spring because they anticipate receival of some of this stuff is projected out to 2025.
Whoa. That,
So in some of our stuff, we're working on borrowed time. If you think about what our ambulance are currently doing and the run times that we're doing based on COVID, we are wearing and tearing the stuff that we have now. So we have to, start looking into replacement, and if it's
So-
gonna be that far out.
So these were things that maybe they would have done 2 years from now, but they want to do now because it's going to take 3 years or 4 years to
And we
get it.
know that, yeah, and they know that actually paying for it, we're forecasting out.
Yeah.
But the delays are so enormous. When we had that big meeting last year and we actually went through 5-year plans, and some of the things that they looked at were, we want a new ambulance, and I remember DPW was looking at maybe a building to cover all the new equipment. These are the sort of things that, there's such a delay that's going to be their objective to push it up. So they just wanted y'all to be aware ahead of time.
Good.
That's it.
Walter?
I did get in touch with the library, and I've been invited to the building meeting that's at the end of the month. I guess it's a monthly. It'll start being monthly, so.
Okay. Tom, have you had a chance to reach out about insurance?
I have not.
Okay. Because the OPEB thing, I think, would be right up your alley.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Z, any reports, any liaison issues? Okay. Paul, Beth, liaison?
Nothing.
Okay. Future draft agendas. Right now, for next week, it looks like we've got the DPW request on the agenda, version 5 of the, version
3.
4. 3. God, I got enough versions going on in my head. Of the warrant. And anything else anybody wants to cover next week? We'll dig in a little more on the warrant, some of the details.
Yeah, we can go over some.
Okay, so, all right. Any public reminders? Beth, did you just request? Did you just ask to say something?
No,
Oh, okay. I thought I heard that, sorry. Okay, any public reminders? Good. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay. We're adjourned, folks.
We
I
should
always
vote.
Oh, that's so cool.
Well done.
We might want to vote.
Yes.
Oh. I take that back. My apologies. I'm sorry.
That's
been a
because
long
when I
day.
had numbers under my
It's just because
breath,
my
I was like,
boxes aren't checked
Okay.
yet, so I
Oh,
know.
okay. Thank you. I have somebody keeping an eye on me. Beth?
Lumber, yes.
Ford, yes.
Roche,
Roland.
yes.
Dolan, yes.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Siddiqui, yes.
Moretti, yes.
That's a
700. Thank you very much. Now I can do it.
Oh, sorry, that's 800, Mike.
Under my hat,
What's-
motion to adjourn, when you were still asking about public comments or something.
That was 800.
Yeah.
We added Hank since.
Oh, that's right, sorry, yeah. Okay, thank you, folks.
Meeting Monday, hybrid?
Thank you, Westborough TV.
Meeting Monday is hybrid, we're here.
We're here in this
In
building.
this,
Oh, wait,
no, across
in
the
the
hall.
Forbes building.
We're over to
We
Forbes.
got,
Probably
we
gonna
got
come here
bounced
on
around.
Monday.
We're somewhere in Westborough.
Yeah, we're in the Forbes
Common
building
area,
on Monday.
open space.
7 o'clock,
Great
Forbes.
Hall,
We're in
7
one of the-
o'clock. Unless you hear otherwise.
Okay.
In which case I'll be confused again.
Uh,